The end is near. Welcome to Ray's Talk Show. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Thank you so much for joining us. And indeed, our ongoing coverage of this wild and wacky, historic, scary, hopeful, all the above presidential election cycle and political season is almost upon us. If you're listening to this show, most likely it is either the day before or the day of Election Day on November 8th. So this is we're almost there, my friends. We're very close. We really appreciate everyone's interest in these conversations we've had with people like Ray Suarez and Elber Garcia and other very special guests we've had. People that are doing the work around the country, mobilizing Latino voters, covering this historic election from a journalist perspective, and just people that have a lot to say about the Latino perspective on not just the Latino vote and the engagement of the Latino community in this election, which is obviously critical. We're going to talk more in this show, this episode, but just in general, our feelings, our community's feelings about this whole process, whether it's the candidates, the rhetoric, our reaction to a variety of things that have gone on this incredible cycle. And so, when it comes to the end of things, when the chips are down, when you got to bring in the stopper to the game, whatever analogy you want to use, I always call them my wise Latinas. So you're going to hear today from two Latinas, one on the East Coast, one in the Mountain West, Georgie Aguirre Sacasa and Claudia Granados, who are just going to give us their reflections about how they feel about this cycle, their perspective as Latinas, as activists, as women, as people that are very engaged in these issues, and these issues are very personal too, and just get their sense of where we go from here, which is actually in some ways the most important question. How do we heal? How do we move forward and hold whoever wins accountable to governing in a way that really services all Americans and provides more access to opportunities for everyone? And so in many ways, that's really the most important question. And Georgie and Claudia give us some very insightful comments, and as well as some of the local perspective. Claudia is a Californian who's now located in Brick City, Newark, New Jersey. So kind of has the perspective of both East Coast and West Coast. And Georgie Aguirre Sacasa, many of you are familiar with, a longtime Beltway a Latino political operative out of Washington, D.C., who relocated a few years back to Colorado, which is now fortuitously is a state we need all the help we can get as a very key swing state, one with growing Latino influence and particularly in presidential elections. So a lot going on here. I'm going to hear from Georgie and Claudia in a second. But also want to let people know that at the end of the show, I'm going to give you my predictions. You're going to hear my perspective, Ray Collazo's perspective on indeed who's going to win this thing, by what electoral votes, maybe give you some predictions on some states, and maybe how the Senate and House end up shaking out. So definitely going to get my predictions at the end of the show. Listen out for that after you hear from great analysis from Georgie and Claudia. And again, you can check out Ray's Talk Show. If you like what you're hearing, please download and subscribe to Ray's Talk Show. Subscribe to Ray's Talk Show on iTunes, anywhere you can find a podcast, whatever your preferable podcast app is, whether it's SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or just check out all of our content at rayspodcast.com. That's RAYS podcast.com. It would be so helpful so people can hear. The more time, please rank and review us on iTunes or wherever you hear us, because that provides more exposure to the program and really will give more of our great insiders and thought leaders in this space, whether it's politics in this election season, personal development, and how we can all really kind of support each other in the Ray's Talk Show community to be to have the life and truly live the life we were all meant to be. So whether it's in politics, marketing, entrepreneurship, that is what the Ray's Talk Show community is all about. So before we get to Georgie and Claudia and my predictions at the end of the show, I did want to share a moment I had today. An article I saw, I believe it was New York Times this morning, Sunday morning. I'm taping this Sunday evening, that spoke to, it was a wonderful article, and I think that best sums it up for me in many ways what this is all about. It was an article about essentially how Latina immigrant women who work in the service industry in Las Vegas, hospitality industry, specifically women, the folks that clean hotel rooms and work in the service industry in Las Vegas as waitresses, janitorial staff, the people that often are invisible in our society. These women are immigrant women. They all have incredible personal stories about they got to the United States and have persevered through all kind of personal challenges, but have not only made a life for themselves and supporting their families, but are becoming an incredible political force for change, positive change, progressive change, and specifically in the politics of the state of Nevada. And that we see this story, this incredible story of women, immigrants, Latinos, Latinas, other people who have this story, whether it's in Miami, the emerging Latino subgroups, whether they're South Americans, Central Americans, the more newly arrived Cuban Americans, Brazilians, what we have in Central Florida, the Puerto Rican community, although American citizens literally been displaced because of the economic crisis and the lack of support for a colony of the United States, even though, millions and millions of Americans live on that island, participate in our service us admirably in our armed forces, and provide incredible contributions to the entire country. Or, the immigrant and Latino communities of Arizona, of Texas, many of which now you're seeing are rising up in historic voting numbers during the early vote period, particularly, which is making Donald Trump's the path to his presidency even more precarious. On and on and on. And I thought about reading that today, is that those stories is what drives me to do this work. And I shared in a public, a brief speech I made today to a group of activists in Philadelphia, including the wonderful Velez sisters, the actors, Luna Lauren Velez and Lorraine Velez, who was canvassing with us today. Much respect to the Velez sisters. I shared one day the story that I would, literally in my 5 or 6 walk block to school every morning when I was 7, 8, 9. It would hit me because when I was a small child in Philadelphia, the media and, the police, political leadership, and then eventually it sort of trickled down to sort of like the nickname for my neighborhood growing up was the Badlands. And, it's just saying that is such bullshit. And it was really angered me and confused me as I would walk to school and say, I know most of the people's home, the families that live in these homes I'm walking past. They're my neighbors, they're friends, they're the people that go to church, or their kids go to school with me. They're the kids we play in the park with, that kind of thing. Little League and my dad's buddies and their kids. And I remember thinking, all these people and all these homes I'm walking past are real decent fucking people. They're hardworking. They deal with discrimination with elegance and class. They're spiritual, many of which have family members or themselves have participated in the military. I mean, I remember. I just remember the stuff my grandparents had to deal with. I mean, having to take my dad to translate for them to pay bills because they didn't want to be belittled for their accent. They spoke English. They just didn't want to be belittled because of an accent that they had. And you just go on and on and on. And I remember, I don't know what it was. I was 15. I don't remember the exact moment. But the bottom line is that I committed to myself that I would dedicate my life to empower this community and now have been able to contribute to many communities. Because my community did not deserve that disrespect, to be called the Badlands and to be called bad inherently because of where we lived and because of our zip code, the zip code where we lived in. So I think about that because when I read that story of these wonderful women, and definitely check out the New York Times Sunday edition to read this amazing story, because those are the women that basically the kind of women that raised me, my mother, my grandmother, neighbors, friends, and it didn't matter if they're from Puerto Rico or Italy or African Americans, Filipinos, which I grew up with many in Philadelphia. Much respect to Manny Pacquiao, great performance over the weekend. It is about that this huge chunk of our society that lives in the shadows, literally and figuratively. And the dignity and the respect and the honor that those people, particularly these women, deserve. And so when we look at this election and we look at the conversation, unfortunately, rearing its ugly head about how we talk about women in this country, how we have a lot of way to go to deal with issues of sexual harassment, sexual assault, victim shaming, abuse of power. It really brings home why this election is so important. And so I don't care if you didn't grow up in the Badlands or you didn't grow up in a community or in a family that you felt invisible by society, ignored by the political establishment. God damn it, you have a responsibility to do the right thing on Tuesday. Let's listen to Georgie Aguirre Sacasa and Claudia Granados, two incredible women, great political analysts, talking about this stuff from coast to coast. And at the end of the show, you're going to hear my predictions. Enjoy these conversations. Welcome back to Ray's Talk Show. This is your Puerto Rican political dude, Ray Collazo. And I just, this is it. It's showtime. If you're hearing this, you're likely hearing this the weekend before Election Day and D-Day, the day we get released from this this political cycle, however you're thinking about it. And I said, well, I think the best way for us to sort of finish this cycle of not only the election cycle, but this cycle of shows we've been doing during the election cycle to give people a little more of a space to discuss just the Latino perspective on this whole thing and bring some great friends and thinkers and activists around the country to this conversation. Ray Suarez and so many of the other great people we've had on the show the last several weeks. I wanted to end it with my wise Latinas, who I always believe should have the last word. And one of them is with us right now, and we wanted to get her perspective, not just about her perspective as one of our great national organizers and thinkers around this space, but someone who knows the work not only nationally, but out in the Great West, where she's currently living in Colorado, a great friend to the show. And finally, after many years of prodding, we finally convinced our publicist to have her join us. Georgie Aguirre Sacasa, welcome finally to Ray's Talk Show. Georgie, it's been too long.
Hi, honey. Thanks for having me. And my publicist, aka my 3-year-old twins, have finally gone to sleep, so I'm actually able to do this with you right now.
Oh, and for those who are friends with Georgie, she has some of the, it's one of the best people to follow on Facebook because she mixes passionate political conversation, those adorable twins, the softer side of Georgie, but then when she puts the twins to sleep or they get distracted on a random Sunday, she becomes one of the meanest Redskin Washington D.C. sports fans. You could have been an Eagle fan in another life, Georgie. You just have that bite to you as a sports fan, and my Philly sports fan friends just love it about you.
This is going to be a quick conversation, seeing that you actually said that I could have been a Phillies fan or an Eagles fan in my previous life.
Absolutely,
I think this conversation is over.
You are well. That's exactly the attitude that we're talking about, and of course that's for another conversation.
Yes, sorry.
We have very similar teams this year. I think you probably would rather have our quarterback long term, but you have the Nationals. They had a fantastic season.
I know.
And I know, and I'm pulling. Georgie's a great baseball fan and sports fan in general, and I'm pulling. She's got one eye in this conversation and one eye on this Game 7 of the World Series, so we're not going to keep her too long. So, Georgie, thank you so much for joining us. I know you have so much going on personally and professionally. So, Georgie, for people that don't know you, one of the great, really political thinkers we have in the space. We're based in D.C. and not out in Colorado. So, I just wanted to start with, where are you at? This has been such a, I want to say even just beyond an exhausting year as political operatives, but it's been emotionally exhausting because of the nature of this campaign. So just wanted to get your temperature about, how you're feeling and how you're thinking about reflecting on this last year in our political lives as we approach Election Day.
Gosh, thanks for that loaded question. No pun intended. I'm exhausted. I'm not going to lie. This election cycle since we were trying to determine from the 16 to 18 Republican candidates running for the nomination to what was happening on the Democratic side. It's been a circus, and quite frankly, I was really happy when finally on October 17th ballots dropped here in Colorado, so that on when I got back from a business trip, I was able to come home and fill out my ballot, fill it out for Hillary Clinton, who I've been supporting since 2008, and mail it in so that I didn't have to worry about anybody sending me mail pieces, calling me, knocking on my doors. I was super happy to get that done with. But look, I think all of us, and you feel this way too, is we're just exhausted. We're emotionally beat up. Last Friday was not helpful with the Comey paper, and I'm looking forward to Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Mountain Time or around that time when finally Hillary is announced as the 45th President of the United States. Then I can celebrate or sleep or whatever happens. I don't even know, but that's what I'm waiting for with bated breath.
Your lips to God's ears, Georgie. And I think beyond. I mean, there's first of all, these cycles are just way too long nowadays. But there's lots of reasons, and obviously
No,
there's
there's no break.
core fundamental reason why it's been particularly exhausting and frustrating. But I think one of the things that's draining us so much is that because we care so much about our country, our community, people,
Mm-hmm.
and providing people equal opportunity, and then you get to this election cycle, which obviously is unprecedented for a lot of reasons, but fundamentally because of Trump's nonsense. I mean, for the most part, almost all of it. It's created an atmosphere where it's the divisiveness is just so beyond just partisan politics, and it's really where many of us, including myself, and I would imagine yourself, feeling like on some level we're being personally attacked, and our and the thing that started it off for me that I still wonder, I think about things like, and I'm just keeping it real, like I think about things like, okay, when Trump, you know, basically, demonized 55 million Americans from the Latino community, saying it's, Mexicans are all rapists and killers, and these people come in our country. And then then there's like this sense that the only people that should be upset about this are Latinos or a certain type of Latinos. And I'm sitting here like, why isn't like this white person who I normally seems like a very nice person who I like, might be a neighbor, might be a friend, like why aren't they as disgusted about this than I am? Or, and then the attacks go on and on, right? So it's like it just makes me question things. It makes me, I don't know, some days I feel it's paranoid, but some days I feel like these are real concerns. So the exhaust, are you feeling that, Georgie, that it just has brought these conversations to a much more fundamental level about like who we are and how we engage each other?
I mean, look, and I'm sort of a trifecta. I'm a Latina lesbian woman, first generation American. I guess not a trifecta, whatever the whatever the fourth thing is.
Poor
That,
cat.
yeah, whatever that is. Um, I have felt personally attacked throughout this election by Trump, and I'm actually dealing with a personal uh, uh, conundrum of some of my family members who, by the way, are women, Latinas, first generation Americans, um, hate Hillary so much that they are going to vote for Trump. And for
Mm.
me, that's a personal attack on my beliefs, on who I am, and I'm having to deal with that just on my family basis. So, um, I feel like there has been an undercurrent, and I think this came from when President Obama was first elected, that this undercurrent of racism that is still prevalent in this country has started to bubble up. And I think they just needed a mouthpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, Trump was that mouthpiece. He gave those people a voice. And, that man is as unarticulate as a 3-year-old boy. And quite frankly, I think my son is more articulate than he
Oh,
is.
for sure.
Um, so, we as a country need to get through, hopefully, this election unscathed, although that's impossible with everything that he has said, with his rhetoric. But my hope is that he will concede on election night and not drag this out. It would be unprecedented for him not to do that. And then we can start healing from this nightmare of an election, and hopefully go back into, not saying to push things under the rug and not deal with what has happened in this country these last couple of years, but at a minimum try to have a civilized conversation with our neighbors and our friends and our family about moving this country forward. Because this, regardless of what has happened in these last 12 months or so, it feels like it's been longer. We are still the greatest country in the world, and we need to fight back to get to a place where there's civil discourse, and people are truly neighbors and take care of one another. And that is my hope. Although, I don't know. I'm sure you have been reading the papers and online on everything, but the talk of militia coming and intimidating voters at polling locations, and if Trump loses, they'll raise arms. I mean, this. I mean, can we curse in your show? This is crazy shit. This is insane. So, anyways, I'm personally dealing with this. Trying to convince my family that a vote for Trump is a vote against me and my little family, and to millions of others, and to the fact that we're immigrants in this country, trying to make a living, and trying to achieve the American dream. So it's to say it's been emotionally exhausting, and to say that we've been battered children is an understatement.
How's it been for you? And I forget exactly when you moved to Colorado from DC, but I don't. Is this your first presidential election in being Colorado resident? I forget if you were there in 12 or not.
It sure
Okay, so
is.
for someone that was
This is my third year
okay,
here.
cool. So for someone that was like a child of the DC bubble, from I mean, you did a lot of
Yeah.
organizing a lot of places, but you're a DC based person. And how do you think the experience has been living out west, and specifically in a swing state, right? So a state with a lot of
Hmm.
interesting dynamics. You've got some obviously in Colorado, all the above, the very extreme conservative, Christian conservative pockets and Springs, and the liberal fancy land of Boulder, and then a lot of Latino hood, neighborhood folks. And so it's interesting mix there. But how's the experience been experiencing this cycle out in Colorado for you?
Well, I mean, number one, the fact that my vote
Yeah.
counts. No offense to my people in DC, but DC with their 2 electoral votes, and it's 94% Democrat. So you have much more at stake. I feel a personal responsibility to do as much as I can, to not just turn out voters for Hillary to the top of the ticket, but also down ballot, which is so critical in a state like Colorado, where we've been known to be the testing ground of some pretty crazy stuff in terms of ballot initiatives. So being able to, for us this year, it's winning back the state Senate. We lost it in 2014 when that red tidal wave of Republican wins spread across this country, as a referendum to Obama and his administration. So we have a really great opportunity to be able to take back the state Senate, which means we would hold both chambers plus governor, which is really exciting. Which means we can really push back and kill some of these crazy right wing, anti women, anti-immigrant, anti-middle class bills that keep coming up in Colorado on a yearly basis legislatively. So that's an exciting piece of being in Colorado for this presidential. But I mean, for me, um, it's I've been working or organizing in the Southwest since my time at during the Kerry Edwards campaign in 2004 when I was in Arizona. And I just need to give a shout out to all my Arizona peeps right now
They're
who
killing it,
are
dog. They're in
fighting
them.
fighting the good
Oh, they're
fight.
keeping us
And
alive out there. It's
they're,
really
yeah, and I drank the Kool-Aid a long time ago. So
You were
I'm,
one of the first ones,
if
yes, yes, that believed the dream
I
of
was
Arizona. No doubt
insane
about it,
then.
Georgie.
Turn Arizona blue. It's going to happen. I feel it. I feel it
It's
in the
gonna happen.
depths of my soul. Um, but so yeah, I've been working in the Southwest, and from Nevada in '08, where I was I was working with one of my dear friends, Andres Ramirez, and we were actually training um, uh, Latino Hispanic Latino um, workers, casino workers, and basically helping unite and the culinary workers train around the first caucus in Nevada, to now being in Colorado, my adopted home state, and being able to get on the phones and knock doors with local organizations. And if I may, because I am a guest on your show, I want to give a shout out to New Era Colorado, which is a youth mobilization organization here in Colorado that mobilizes millennials to vote. And there was just a New York Times report out, I think it was yesterday, the day before yesterday, where in all states except Colorado, the youth vote early vote returns have been less than 2012, but Colorado has exceeded that number. And I know that it's because of New Era Colorado, for Next Gen Climate, and the other organizations doing this really hard work to mobilize these millennials to vote for in an election where they dislike both candidates, but we need to motivate them. So we're doing it through issues, and you can't sit this one out. Too much is at stake. So shout out to my peeps over at New Era Colorado as well.
Yeah, they're doing some good stuff there, and it's for people that haven't, Georgie. On that note, maybe give people a quick, some quick thoughts about kind of the landscape. So for people that just follow it, somewhat casually over the last few cycles, Colorado was sort of in the same mix as Nevada. In that key swing state. There was an emerging Latino electorate, unclear how much of an impact to some it would make, particularly when it came to kind of polling and initial projections. Generally speaking, particularly in presidential cycles, the Obama coalition, which included an emerging Latino electorate along with millennials and other folks in those two
Mm-hmm.
states specifically have made them going from both purple to Colorado being much more bluish, and that partially coincided with Georgie moving to the state, by the way, if you look at it. But and then so them
Ha.
being in different places and to the point where until very recently we hadn't heard much about Colorado because it was sort of the polling was suggesting it was very more solidly blue for Hillary. So what's interesting about Colorado is this interesting mix, and we were joking about it before we went on, but turn on the microphones. But you do have kind of as part of the quote unquote Obama coalition or the Democratic coalition, you've got kind of the God love the progressives out in Colorado, the tree huggers, the folks that love the outdoors, and the good ideological folks, and then you have a lot of working class people, many of which are Latinos and African Americans, and kind of how that coalition not only votes together but also is part of governing together, which is sort of interesting. So for folks that aren't, and there's some funding dynamics in the donor community, which is a whole other conversation, which is almost a unique dynamic that we have there in Colorado. And we could talk about that another time. But Georgie, just for folks that hadn't been thinking about Colorado as much this cycle, give us the lay of the land in terms of how all these folks find a way to work together.
So Colorado is a unique state. You're right. There are a lot of progressive organizations, and the beauty of Colorado is that we've all learned to work together, and through coalition tables. And I won't get into the weeds on it, but on the independent side and also on the hard side, through the party, there's been an understanding and a commitment to not duplicate efforts in the state, so that people can prioritize the work and the races that they want to play in, and do so and do so in a way that everyone gets a piece of the pie and everyone gets to work towards the goal of maintaining, in this case, a majority in the House, winning back the state Senate, and making sure that Senator Bennett gets reelected, and trying to win back some of these congressional races that we've lost in the last couple of cycles. Which there's actually a really good opportunity in two districts to actually gain back two congressional seats.
Yeah, and those are not only Democratic wins, but
Oh
those
yeah, well, I mean,
Latino
one of
voter
them
wins, which is
is
exciting. Yeah.
CD6, which is currently held by Republican Mike Kaufman, which is in Arapahoe County in Aurora, which is a very heavily Latino district. And we have a very strong candidate, state senator, former state senator Morgan Carroll. She's running a phenomenal campaign. Our hope is that we can actually turn out the Latino vote for her, and get that seat away from Representative Kaufman. So there's a lot of actual opportunities here. But you're right in saying that Colorado wasn't really in anyone's mind until recently, and I think it's because Trump has been spending a lot of time here. He and Pence have been here for the last 2 weeks. I think 6 or 7 times thus far. I think Pence is coming back. If not, isn't back in the state. I try to ignore when they're here, although it's very hard to. But I really
Especially
hate
Pence. You
that
gotta
guy.
really hate that
God,
guy. My
no,
goodness.
I hate Trump more,
You
but I
know?
really hate Pence too. Um, but
Yeah. Well, Pence has actually passed things. Trump is
oh,
all talk.
I know,
Pence
and
is
but
his I mean, they're rough. I mean, I know. So I'm just saying he's.
look, they're all
I
devil
mean, even
incarnates
though he
in
gets
my eyes.
involved,
But
he's, I mean,
he is a
he's a bad dude,
very
no
bad
doubt about
dude.
it.
I feel
Love
bad
his
for the
stuff,
people of
people who boo
Indiana, the
him. He's
great
a
state of
bad guy.
Indiana. But anyways,
Oh, I
no,
know.
I think people are starting to
It's
really focus on
frustrating.
Colorado because he has been spending a lot of time here. He has been up in the air. The Clinton campaign went down on the air in late summer. I think it was actually, can't remember, July, um, which was interesting. But I think they wanted to focus on some of the other swing states that are out there, from Pennsylvania, Ohio, um, Iowa, Florida, obviously North Carolina. And because of the infrastructure that is in place in Colorado, um, a lot of candidates at the national level know that it's well taken care of, and that's something that we pride ourselves in our field operation, um, and our ability to talk to voters, and this new phenomena of text messaging, which everybody is starting to do now in this cycle, and raising the issues that matter to Coloradans, and not just laying it on thick because they think they want to hear that. So yeah, Colorado's still in play though. I mean, nothing is a done deal until all the votes are counted on November 8th. And the folks here on the ground are phone banking, are door knocking, are chasing down those ballots because, as I think as you know, this is a vote by mail state now, and the first year we did that was in 2014. So there's still a lot of educating that has to happen to make sure Coloradans know that how your ballot will arrive in the mail. You need to fill it out. You can mail it back. You need to put 2 stamps on it. Now, what day is it? November 3rd. It's too late to mail in your ballot. So now you can take your ballot to a drop-off location, or Denver actually has a couple of locations where you can actually drive up and you give your ballot to a elector. I don't know what they're called, but a person who works at the at that polling location, and they receive your ballot, or they can go to a voting center and actually vote in person, yeah.
And one of the things that's interesting about that is that it's I mean, I know anecdotally, and I think we've done some polling on this, particularly in Arizona and in Colorado at times, is that Latino voters in particular prefer these kind of options in terms of early vote and vote by mail, so that
Yep.
first of all, it's more convenient for working people in general, but also because it minimizes the opportunity, an opportunity to potentially be
Yep.
harassed, or to have a bad voting experience at a physical polling place. So that's something that is notable. A ballot, and Georgie, I super appreciate your time. I know you've it's been an exhausting cycle, and this isn't even your top job, of course, raising those beautiful twins you have. With your partner and the great family you guys have out in Colorado. What else for folks that are going to hear this and are just trying to hear some words of wisdom for someone that knows what they're talking about? Just any final words? I love the shout outs. Anything else on your mind you wanted to share with our?
I just want, if you're a Democrat, don't panic. Do what you can to get Hillary Clinton elected. It's not okay to sit this one out for a variety of reasons. You need to have your voice heard. Don't think the system is broken. It's not. We just need to clean up Washington, and we can start doing that by electing Hillary Clinton, continuing electing progressive Democratic leaders from Senate down to city council to school board. Don't forget your down ballot races. Educate yourself. I'm sure every state has a voter guide out there that you can do research on. This election is too important. It's too important for the future of this country, and I just hope people get out and vote.
We're continuing as we hit the home stretch here. The final days, yes, it is almost finally over, of this wild and wacky y bien loco political season. And our audience has really enjoyed the conversations. We've talked to people like Ray Suarez, um, and a great network of political strategists and friends around the country doing the good work, because most of us are out here with very good intentions trying to uplift our community, and in this case in particular, the Latino community. And we have as I just thought about the home stretch here, I just wanted to hear from my wise Latinas around the country about what they were feeling, what their hopes and dreams were as we move past this election, hopefully with some positive results on Tuesday. And so that what do we make sense of what 2016 from a political perspective meant to us? And one of our great wise Latinas that we go to for this kind of counsel, this kind of consejo, this kind of assurance and wisdom is a great friend to the show, Claudia Granados. Claudia, welcome to Ray's Talk Show. So glad you're here for the first time.
Thank you, Ray. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
And Claudia has a lot of experience as a government relations and political strategist. Those of you, a lot of my friends from labor or Democratic politics are familiar with Claudia, and she represents both coasts, a Californian that's been doing a lot of great work on the East Coast and specifically New Jersey over the last several years. So Claudia's perspective is right on time here. Claudia, so first of all, before we get into picking your brain about your perspective on this election cycle, remind people where they can find you on social media.
Yes, so they can find me on Twitter at CA Girl 80. Girl 80 is my Twitter handle.
That's awesome. So Claudia, I think it's 5 days away, 6 days away when we're taping this today, and I can imagine the roller coaster of emotions that you've gone through this year as a Democratic strategist and political strategist. So just get us in the mind of Claudia Granados 5 days out. What are your feelings and thoughts, and as you reflect on what we've gone through and the home stretch here of this election?
Well, first of all, I think this has been one of the longest campaigns that I can remember. It is very unprecedented in terms of having a candidate from the Republican Party that is not your typical candidate, somebody who has worked in government and who has gone from office to office and is trying to reach the highest level. But you have somebody who bills himself as an outsider and who has basically flipped the entire process. So it's been exhausting, to say the least. I think that a lot of us feel that we have post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I think everybody's going to be quite happy when this is over.
I did want to focus on that emotional part in a moment, because one of the things that's happened, particularly in the higher end political media, there's been a lot of discussion about people trying to understand the psychosis and the psychology of this Trump voter, the proverbial angry white person, and it's run the gamut, right? I mean, there's been belittling of and sort of thumbing their nose or looking down on, and we've even done that in our, not saying you and I personally, but in our networks, kind of looked at, oh, look at these ignorant racists, to there being an empathetic sort of sociological attempt to analyze who these people are and why we need to better understand them. But one of the things that frustrates me is that on the flip side, there's very little attention paid to the psychological impact of, in this case, Latinos and Latinas that are being attacked for every identity that they have, as women, as Latinas, as potentially as immigrants, as working people. And so I just wanted to, does that make sense? And can you speak a little bit about the toll that this has taken in some degree psychologically for not just activists, but people in our community?
Absolutely. I think that is the most underreported and overlooked fact. I mean, look, you essentially have in a campaign, a candidate that has made it okay to come out of the woodwork and really expose a lot of the deep division and hatred that people really feel towards people in this changing world that we live in these days, right? We live in a very globalized economy, and a lot of people are hurting financially. So there's just a lot of resentment and anger. And what it has done is allowed people to blame a whole bunch of groups of people and have a lot of misplaced anger. And, after, when the election is over next Tuesday, a lot of those feelings that have come out from people feeling all this hate, you're not going to put it back in the bottle, right? Like once you let the genie out of the bottle, it's out. You can't go back and put it inside and say, okay, we'll come back in the next 4 years. And so to me, the important thing that we have to really begin to address very quickly is what it has done for the young generations or kids, what it's done to the psychology of Latinos, when a lot of people feel that it's okay to be very openly discriminatory against our community and say very hateful things. And I think that the race, there's just so much division, right? And people are really frustrated. And I don't think anybody, whoever ends up winning this campaign, they have to, we have to really step back as a country and really try to understand and bridge that gap, that divide that exists, because there's a lot of inflammatory remarks that have been said, and it's caused a lot of problems. For example, in the Latino community, we have more and more cases where there's been a lot of hate crimes that are very underreported in the news media. And I think I think if somebody were to do a study, you would see that, there's probably some correlation with a lot of the fear mongering that's been going on in terms of empowering people to go out and really voice their racism against a group of people.
There's the violence and the very obvious incidents that, like you said, have been underreported. And there's the stuff you can't qualify: the bullying in school, the teasing, the increased discrimination. I can't sit here. I'm a pretty obviously looking person of color, Latino guy. Maybe you think I'm Middle East. I often think I get more the looks and more maybe the second glances because maybe they perceive me as Muslim, to be honest with you, or Middle Eastern. But all of that kind of uncomfort and discrimination, some of it subtle, some of it not so subtle. You can't quantify, and like you said, it's not going to go away after Tuesday, because what what's been unlocked is this sort of, like you said, this permission to be angry and take out your frustrations about your life. And instead of pointing it to, from a sort of political perspective to, the elites, possibly from various sides of the spectrum that maybe haven't, serviced you, and taken it, and blaming, your fellow working people. And it's really sad. And it is a tough balance for Latinos and Latino activists, Claudia, because on one hand, we absolutely have to stand up and not only, fully participate and stand up for ourselves, and so people, out of respect for ourselves and our community, and just to be fully present as leaders and call out these injustices, whether it's the underreporting of hate crimes or the rhetoric spewed against us, or inequitable policies across the board. But we do have to take the extra step as leaders to be empathetic, and because if we take a very adversarial and hostile attitude towards this community of mostly white people that don't seem particularly happy that we're around, we're not going to be able to truly move together ultimately as a country. So there is a very emotionally challenging dynamic that exists there. Because I'll keep it real, Claudia. There's I wonder. I mean, even from comments you see on Facebook and stuff, and I sit here and wonder, and it's so unlike my nature. I'd like to be cool with everybody and inclusive. And I sit here and I see somebody, sometimes they're white, sometimes they're not, make a comment sort of pro this candidacy. And I'm like, does this person either understand what they're really saying or buying into? Does this person really care about me? Is this person trying to be friends with anymore? And just the fact that this paranoia has creeped up in my life is not healthy. But we have to move forward in the spirit of brotherhood, sisterhood, and take that kind of leadership. I'm curious, Claudia, from a political operative perspective, one of the things that has been interesting to me is that I've been trying to compare the level of energy between the very sort of positive, hopeful energy that came out of the Obama candidacy and ultimately winning in 08 and 12 that I saw, particularly in the Latino community. There was definitely a sense of, this being a historic race for us too, on some level. And compared to this, I would say comparable energy on the other end, fear, disgust, and just a real strong commitment to making sure Donald Trump doesn't win, which I'm seeing coast to coast. I've spent time in Nevada recently. I've spent some time in Florida, in the Northeast where we're at. And it's pretty clear that Latinos understand who's for us and against us. So are you seeing that, Claudia? I mean, it's sort of an interesting dynamic because on one level, you would think that the negative energy would not be as productive as it turns out to turning out the vote, but at the same time, I'm sensing it's going to lead to a pretty big turnout on Tuesday. So what are your thoughts? What are you sensing on the ground, Claudia, the attitude of Latino voters around all this?
I think, if anything that has come out of this election is how deeply divided a nation we are, right? I mean, you are seeing, I think, for certainly my lifetime, that people are really challenging the role of government because people are frustrated. And so what's fascinating about all this is that same people who are turning out to be to this message of fear mongering and who are very excited about electing someone who, all he does is perpetuate this culture of fear is, they have lived through years and years of gridlock in D.C. after participating for years in the electoral process and not seeing any changes, right? And that's what I would say for what's happened across the nation in general. For us Latinos, we tend to be much more concentrated in the big cities, although that's changing drastically as well. But, we have a little bit of we have the same issues, right? We share the same economic issues that a lot of the whites in the South with no jobs have. A lot of what's happened when you had trade policies that started exporting a lot of the jobs abroad left all this middle America without factories, without any manufacturing. So people then see no opportunity. So they're frustrated, right? Because they participate. You have politicians who promise them that it's going to change as they get into office, and all they get is gridlock. So I think, what you're seeing is the same issues that are being faced by Latinos, by other people of color are being, there's this a white population that are extremely poor, that they feel very disenfranchised, and they feel that the government is not helping them too. They're challenging that role of what government is intended to do in their eyes. So, I think we are seeing, back when Obama, right, there was a participation of support, I think, for Latinos, that they thought there was hope. We were going to get immigration reform. The economic perspective was going to be better. We were going to have more jobs. We were coming out of the defunct of 2008, right, when we thought the world was ending because of the financial crisis. And so, and we're doing a lot better now, but there's a lot of people who have been left behind. And even though we have some, we're in the middle of the process of economic resurgence, it hasn't trickled down in a real way to people, right? And so that's, I think, is what we're seeing. And that's what Latinos are feeling and seeing. And I think the biggest fear is, what do you do in communities where Latinos have settled, have been there for more than a generation, or certainly for the last 10, 20 years, and they, they have made their lives, they have families, and because of immigration status or whatnot, they can't vote, and all of a sudden they feel like all of that can be ripped underneath them, their security, whether that's their home or their kids in school, because you have a candidate who's spouting out there, he's just going to deport everybody, right? That's primarily Latino. So even though, frankly, immigration gets put on our shoulders, people often forget that immigration impacts not just Latinos, but it impacts a wide variety of people from all over the world.
And lest we forget that there's an estimated 50,000 undocumented Irish immigrants in this country. And last time I checked, there's been no call to mass deport Irish Americans. So it's you're absolutely right. It impacts all kind of people, whether we want to acknowledge it as a country or not. There's no doubt about it. And to the credit of the Latino community, Latino immigrant rights leadership fights for the rights of all the people you just talked about. So regardless of what part of the world they're coming from. And you're listening to Claudia Granados, one of our great friends to the show, and government relations, political strategist. This woman's done it all from labor to party politics. Someone very tuned into the Senator Booker network. Work with a lot of our great friends. We were just saying offline that we could probably sit here and we flipped out our phones. We'd have very similar contact lists in our phones because we collaborate a lot with a lot of the same people in the Northeast. And of course, special shout out to Claudia's current home base of Newark, New Jersey. The Brick City is one of my favorite places in the world. And if you've never been to Newark, not only does it produce some interesting political figures like Senator Booker and Claudia Granados, but it has some of the best food in the United States. You just go to Ferry Avenue and the Ironbound District. You just have blocks and blocks of wonderful cuisine from all over the world. So much respect to our friends in Newark. Claudia, I wanted to ask you, your New Jersey Latinos have had a unique perspective on this because on one hand, we are represented by good folks like Senator Cory Booker, Senator Menendez, a very relative diverse leadership base there. But y'all are we live in Christie world, and we are also dealing with the specter of Donald Trump, who's just across the river. We have an interesting perspective, and I just wanted you to, if you have a moment, just to kind of share how your thoughts on how sort of imagine people in the Southwest and Florida and other parts of the country may be curious about how New Jersey Latinos are having to deal with all this, because we have, for the national perspective, Christie goes away maybe, hopefully after Tuesday, but for us, we still have to deal with him. And by the way, he's been a horrible governor since he stopped running for president. My goodness, he's been terrible with all the things. But anyway, your thoughts on it from the Jersey side of the world?
I think so I'm a transplant from California, so my perspective is really shaped by California politics and Latinos being the majority there. We're dime a dozen in California, right? So I remember, like when Antonio Virragos and I worked on his campaign. He's a former mayor of Los Angeles, but I remember when he was Speaker of the Assembly, I was in college, and I remember what a big moment of pride that was for us reaching those milestones. And now you're like, Kevin De Leon, he's, the Senate president. Okay, what's next? Because we've become so used to having Latinos, people that look like us in our community, be in positions of power in California. Here in the East Coast, I've always been fascinated here since I moved here, because when I moved here, I remember when I was in New York and I first arrived, and one of the first things I was doing, and I was working at that time as deputy political director for SCAU Local 32 BJ, and it's like, we got to help this, some of our external partners want to do this campaign so that we can have government forms printed in Spanish. So, for example, if somebody goes to the hospital and they need to fill out their forms, they should be bilingual. I was like, what? How can you be fighting that? This is 2000 and whatever, right? And, so to me, that was such a foreign concept. And so when I came to Newark to work for then Mayor Cory Booker, Newark is a city specifically that it's the largest city in the state of New Jersey. It is, for the last census track, it was 30% Latino, but you wouldn't know it if you walked through there in terms of who's in office and the levers of power. You look around in terms of the state politics, assembly and Senate, and I think we, as big as the population is, I think we are so behind in organizing our community and demanding more from the current elected officials. I get frustrated because, I want to go out there and kick the dust and say, like, listen, stop taking us for granted. We're big in numbers. We can turn people out. Our kids go to school, or, our community pays taxes. We're business owners. In New Jersey specifically, it's difficult to find anybody in power, in real power, to making decisions that is Latino, right? And so I am, and there's this whole backlash that we're getting from New York because of Trump, calling it, you see a Latino, they think, everybody's a Mexican and a rapist and whatever, right? So, because we all look like the same to them, unfortunately, that they would have that sort of view of my community, very short-sighted. But we in New Jersey, I think, have ways and ways to go. I think we need to start, making major impact at the very, very local level, and that's at the school boards, where a lot of our children are going to failing schools. That is, at the city, municipal levels, where, property taxes are high. A lot of our folks were deeply impacted during the housing crises, right, when the foreclosure thing happened. So the list goes on and on and on, Ray, and we don't have the power that we should have, and we are not anywhere near where we need to be in Jersey. I think, we have a governor, Chris Christie, who seriously has never shown any care or compassion for our community or for our issues, frankly. I think we have about 18 more months, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like, we get stuck with him for another year and a half, even though nobody's minding the store at the governor's office, because who knows where he's at these days.
He's raising our gas like 30 cents a gallon. That's what he's been doing.
Yeah, right. And listen, I mean, I commute into New York because, now I'm working in New York, and I got to be honest with you. I mean, I keep telling everybody, and I keep tweeting about it, right? Like, and I keep saying, oh my God, who's organizing all these commuters? Because it is atrocious that we're having to live with a system that is broken, infrastructure system that is broken. Had he actually approved the ARC tunnel, we would be halfway done with that project, right? And so, but he killed it. He sent the money down south, right? And so, if you recall, that money from the federal government was there so that we could have gotten people back to work, and that impacted a lot of our. A big impact was in our community, particularly in the trades, right? So trade workers. So we I think have to really mobilize and really start getting more people elected that look like us and understand our community. And I'm not of the opinion that only Latino can represent Latino. What I am saying is, we need to start holding these elected officials' feet to the fire. We are a huge community, and we need to we need to organize ourselves in New Jersey so that all these electeds can start taking us seriously, because they only come around when it's election time.
Yeah, no, there's lots to do, and that's Claudia. That's how I wanted to wrap this up. One of the things that's come up, which on the positive side, is that there's been frustration, emotions, but I also have seen, kind of my informal survey of my Facebook universe is that there are a lot of people that maybe aren't in it like lifers like we are, as activists and operatives, but really do want to, whether they're young professionals or mid-career professionals, they want to they want to. It seems like they're having an itch to get more involved and want to feel like they can move, they can somehow contribute. And so for those folks listening to this that after election day are kind of wondering what next, what would be your advice to them about how they can get engaged to make a difference? Regardless of who's in the White House. And look, even if Hillary wins, which she likely will win Tuesday, there's a good chance that she, likely she'll have to still deal with a Republican Congress. The Senate's probably 50-50 at this point, and all these local and state issues and dynamics that you're referring to. So, just what would be your advice to people about how to sort of feel like they're making a difference in moving forward and making a positive change?
I guess the first thing I would say that, look, the real issue here is a divide over economic policies. We are in economic resurgence, as I stated at the beginning of our conversation. But the problem is that those economics are not trickling down to people on the floor, right to the ground. So what we need to do is close that gap. And my hope is that the divide, we're going to be able to work on closing that divide going forward. Neither party has the answer, right? So don't get discouraged that it's got to be this party over that party, because let me remind the listeners that when Obama came into office in 2008, we Democrats had both Congress and Senate, and there was an incredible amount of gridlock. We could have had immigration reform, and it didn't happen, right? That's one of the issues, right? And so then second term, he gets a Republican Congress, we're with a Republican Senate, and we're still having the same gridlock. So what I would say, the second point that I would make here is what I believe is the most important that I always say to people is the most important day is not election day, but the day after, right? Because we have to govern the day after. So the way you're going to get involved, you were so excited. I was a Bernie supporter. I wanted, because I like the power of people contributing and feeling this hope that, really important issues hitting real people were being put at the front of the line through his campaign. So now it's our job. It's the day after election. We got to hold people accountable. Go register people to vote. Start with your family and friends. Participate at the local level. Get on a commission. Go to your school, your kids' schools. Go volunteer. There's a lot of all the politics are at the local level. And so your involvement continually after this is going to be key to really closing that gap in that divide and and holding everybody's feet to the fire. Because that's the only way we're going to have accountability. It is not about party politics. What it is about is, holding whoever it is and trying to have an equilibrium. A bipartisan way is the best way to govern, because it is the only way that moves the people forward.
It's interesting because once you start holding people accountable, you start going to city council meetings, you start getting involved in the school board. There's two things that happen. One is you'd be amazed what kind of voice you could have, even just testifying or, lobbying as an individual taxpayer or parent. But then you're going to realize, well, wow, I can do this. I can run for school board. This isn't that hard. You don't need that many votes. You don't have to raise that much money. It's not on that very local entry level. You'd be surprised how much is possible you can get done, even as a private citizen and then potentially as a local elected official. School boards around the country. I mean, I know there was an issue in Arizona that there were not even enough people to run for a lot of school boards and just fill the body, in some of those smaller towns in rural Arizona, which many Latinos live in. So there's lots of opportunities out there to get involved, even if as potentially an elected official or an activist that can make a lot of noise. I have a good friend, Ray Collazo, that her expertise is developing online petition campaigns around different issues around the country, and it's just incredible. This woman impacts issues, impacting women and progressive causes all over the country, and oftentimes never been in these communities. So there's a lot you can do. And Claudia Granados, we're going to continue to collaborate with you and monitor all the great things you're doing. Remind people again where they can find you on social media to continue the conversation.
Thank you. Yes. You can find me on Twitter. I tweet a lot about yoga, politics, and all things Latino. My handler is CAGirl80, CAGirl80, and I look forward to speaking with you on the trail in the future. So
absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. This has been a great conversation with you, Claudia. And hopefully Tuesday we'll be able to breathe a sigh of relief after Tuesday night. Hopefully it doesn't get to where our friends in Nevada are kind of the deciding factor. It's possible. We'll see how it goes. And thank you, Georgie and Claudia, for your insights. Those were really thoughtful conversations, and we look forward to having Georgie and Claudia back on Ray's Talk Show to continue these conversations post-election. But I wanted to before we wrap up the show, I wanted to give you my fearless predictions. Now, before you scoff at my thoughts, before I had a podcast, I was, my brother and my wife and a few other people can vouch. I had really good feelings about things like then Senator Obama's potential chances going into 2007 when he was even considering running for president, and other predictions along the way. So I have a fairly decent track record with this stuff, and I've been looking at it. Obviously, have lots of contacts in places like Nevada, Florida, in the Southwest and the industrial Northeast coast, places like Pennsylvania and Ohio and the Carolinas and Virginia, and this is just my humble opinion, of course. And I always feel that you don't really truly have a real good sense of it unless you've spent some time during the cycle in a state. So, and I didn't get a chance this cycle to go to places like Colorado and Arizona, which I would love to have gone to. They've really done a great job here down the stretch, and even Virginia or North Carolina. But I have spent some time in Florida this cycle, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and been in close contact with people, particularly in Virginia. So I think I have a decent sense of it. So this is again, just take it for what it's worth, but this is where I'm at. I think at the end of the day, Secretary Clinton becomes our president. I've got our 303 electoral votes. So that means that I think the story coming out of this is that the Latino vote, the surge, particularly the indications that we've gotten from early vote. Indeed, I saw something that CNN reported that as many people, Latinos in Florida, that voted in the entire election throughout that process in 2012 in Florida have already voted during the early vote period before we even get to election day. So that just gives you an indication of the kind of growth in the electorate. The enthusiasm is there. And I think at the end of the day, that with Florida and Nevada, I think those are going to be the two key states that we're going to look back on and say, wow, President-elect Clinton owes this presidency electorally to the Latino community. That means, though, that I think she's going to have some challenges in some states that I think even a few weeks ago looked much more likely. So in my calculations, a few of the northern states, which obviously from the beginning appeared to be favorable for the kind of the profile, appealing to the kind of profile voter that Trump was appealing to in places like Iowa, which, throughout this process has looked to be in Trump's column through all the polling starting in the summer even. And I just think Ohio, partially, ironically, Portman may pull Trump through being such a strong Senate candidate who's been way ahead in the polls against former Governor Kirkland for quite some time. I think Trump ultimately gets Ohio. I just have not seen any polling or anything that indicates to me that that Clinton's going to pull off Ohio. So I think, but on the flip, and just for the purpose of this conversation, Clinton must know something in her total polling. She's in New Hampshire as we speak. So I'm not feeling, and I think Ayotte, ironically enough, may help Trump pull off New Hampshire. That's by a whisker. I just have a bad feeling about North Carolina. North Carolina is a 50-50 state at best for Democrats. I know the demographics are evolving. I'm very aware of that. I think the Latino vote will be strong. I think the African-American vote at the end of the day will be fairly strong. But I just think it's a really close state. And I'll believe when I see it, I guess is kind of the bottom line. I'm hopeful, and I think it'll be very close. But there's a lot of coin flips here, so we're not going to win all of them. I think at the end of the day, though, Florida safely gives Secretary Clinton the victory, and Nevada puts her over 300. It's going to be close. It's going to be close. My fear is that if for whatever reason, and again in pretty much a toss up as well, Florida, if it goes to Trump, and literally the difference ends up being Nevada, while that would be sweet, ironically enough, with our Latinos in Vegas, who I've chronicled quite a bit here on the show, pulling her over the top, the fact that it would be a very close election, one of which, depending on how some of the states shook out, Trump would have, somewhat of a wobbly leg to stand on to continue his quest to discuss a platform to talk about a rigged system. But that essentially that would mean that very much the industrial North, the Wisconsins, the Michigans, the Minnesotas, the Pennsylvania, which obviously will have a Latino flavor to it, but ultimately those states, which are pretty white, will get the primary credit for this election, and so that's what I'm concerned about. I really want to see the Latino electorate get its proper due. I think. While I don't know if Hillary can pull off Texas and Arizona this cycle, I think they're going to be really close, and I think we're going to see that Trump essentially has sort of sped up the timetable for those states becoming purplish and bluish, probably a cycle earlier than expected and projected by statisticians. So to recap, 303 electoral votes for Secretary Clinton's my prediction. She wins relatively comfortably. But I think depending on how close Florida is, we're going to be sweating it well into the night. But ultimately, she pulls it off. On the Senate, ask me tomorrow. I might change my mind. At this point, I'm predicting 51-49 Republican control. I just, if you look at the Senate map and the states we're talking about in play, obviously, it's very much these states that are in the industrial North Shore, the old Democratic coalition. The Wisconsins, I think Feingold will get his seat back. I think Duckworth will win as expected in Illinois. I think McGinty, what a lucky candidate this woman is. I think she'll squeak it through in Pennsylvania. But then beyond that, I'm not optimistic about New Hampshire. I'm not optimistic about Florida. I'm not optimistic about Indiana. I don't feel good at the moment. Maybe tomorrow it'll be different. I don't feel good about Missouri. So that leaves the first Latina in the U.S. Senate, Catherine Cortez Masto, squeaking it out in Nevada, and I mean squeaking it out, to be the 49th Democratic member of the Senate. So that's just where I'm at right now. We'll see about the House. So many positions. I think obviously Democrats will pick up some seats, probably closer to 10 to 12 range, but we will see. But that's where my predictions are at right now. But the most important thing is for folks to realize, regardless of where they're at with this, even if you disagree with my politics, I encourage you, I implore you to get involved. Vote if you already have it, many of which have, including myself. I voted early this year for the first time. Go out and vote. Let your friends, family, if you don't live in a swing state, doesn't matter. Go vote. Then call your friends in Florida. Call your friends in Texas. Call your friends in Nevada. Call your friends around the country. Implore them. Send them a text. Shame them on social media. Whatever you got to do, get them out to vote. It is so important for our democracy, for our country, and for our community. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Ray's Talk Show. You'll hear from me at some point. Check me out. If you're friends with me on Facebook, check me out on Facebook. I'm doing Facebook Lives from my field operation. Have had a lot of fun. So definitely check me out, Rafael Collazo on Facebook. And at some point, Wednesday, Thursday, I'll get together one or two of my buddies after we decompress to recap what's happened here. I know people starting Wednesday morning are going to have a lot to talk about. And this is the next 48 hours is just going to be incredibly exciting. Thank you so much for listening to Ray's Talk Show. Again, subscribe to us on iTunes or anywhere you pick up a podcast. You can catch a podcast. And providing us a review specifically on iTunes is incredibly helpful to move us up in the ranks so more people can be exposed to these wonderful conversations that we have on Ray's Talk Show related to just helping us be more of 100% of who we are every moment of our life, whether it's in the political arena, personal development, entrepreneurship, and just building on the great rays of light that we have here, like Georgie and Claudia. Thank you so much. Go out and vote. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening to Ray's Talk Show. For more insights from your virtual Big Brother, Ray Collazo, and the Big Brother Ray community, subscribe to Ray's Talk Show at BigBrotherRay.com or on iTunes. To my rays of light, keep shining.